There is a hidden truth about the mind that most people never discover. The mind is always being controlled by something. It is being shaped by thoughts that were never questioned, beliefs that were inherited unconsciously, patterns absorbed in childhood, and internal narratives that operate beneath awareness. The shocking part is this: the mind can be controlled by the world, or it can be controlled consciously from within. And the difference between these two realities determines the difference between a life lived on autopilot and a life shaped with intention. Conscious mind control is not manipulation, it is mastery. It is the process of reclaiming sovereignty over the internal world so that external forces can no longer decide emotional states, reactions, or identity. But why do so few people ever access this level of inner control? Most minds operate in reactive mode. They respond automatically to triggers, emotions, memories, tone of voice, small cues, and associations formed long before awareness developed. The mind becomes a machine of instant reactions, repeating old scripts over and over, even when those scripts cause pain. Someone says something slightly critical, and the mind generates defensiveness before understanding. A situation resembles a past hurt, and the mind produces fear before evaluating the present. A moment of uncertainty appears, and the mind fills it with worst-case scenarios. These are not conscious choices, they are subconscious programs. And the most important realization is this: the subconscious runs approximately 85% of the mind's activity. This means the vast majority of internal experience is happening without conscious permission or awareness. Conscious mind control begins with recognizing that internal reactions are not the self, they are patterns. When someone begins to see this difference, something profound happens. The moment the mind becomes the object of observation instead of the ruler of experience, an entirely new dimension of awareness opens. This moment is the doorway to self-mastery. But entering that doorway requires confronting a difficult question. If the mind has been reacting automatically for so long, who has actually been in control of life? One of the most surprising discoveries in psychology and consciousness research is that the mind is programmable. Thoughts create neural pathways. Reactions strengthen them. Repetition makes them automatic. And what becomes automatic becomes identity. This means identity itself is shaped by patterns that were reinforced unconsciously. A child who heard repeatedly that they were too sensitive develops an identity around sensitivity. A child who experienced unpredictability learns to anticipate danger. These identities feel like truth, but they are actually learned programs. Conscious mind control is the process of rewriting these programs intentionally. The subconscious mind is not a mysterious force. It is simply the part of the mind that learned without asking permission. Childhood experiences, emotional wounds, repeated messages, tone, and environment all shaped the subconscious. It absorbed everything without filtering. A child does not evaluate beliefs, a child adopts them. So what happens when an adult still operates with a subconscious shaped by childhood experiences? Automatic emotional responses appear without explanation. Unconscious fears trigger without clear cause. Self-protective patterns emerge in situations that do not require protection. And the person experiencing all of this often has no idea why. Conscious mind control begins by recognizing that many of these internal patterns are outdated survival mechanisms. They were useful once, but they are no longer serving the present reality. This is where the first mini ganchos emerge. Why does the mind react strongly to things that do not matter? Why does a small comment activate a disproportionate emotional response? Why do familiar situations trigger anxiety even when nothing is wrong? These questions reveal the internal architecture of unconscious programming. They expose the fact that the mind is still protecting the self from dangers that no longer exist. To practice conscious mind control, a shift must occur from reactivity to observation. But observation alone is not enough. The mind must be trained. And every training process begins with understanding the mechanisms that already exist inside. The internal mechanisms of the mind operate in layers. The deeper the layer, the more influence it has. Most people only interact with the surface layer, the conscious thoughts that appear during the day. But these thoughts are only the final output of a much deeper internal system. Beneath conscious thoughts are emotional states. Beneath emotional states are core beliefs. Beneath core beliefs are survival patterns formed in childhood. Conscious mind control requires navigating these deeper layers with awareness, precision, and intention. One of the most powerful aspects of conscious mind control is learning to identify the difference between emotional truth and mental narratives. The mind often creates stories to explain emotional sensations. Fear becomes a prediction. Sadness becomes a narrative about loss. Shame becomes a narrative about inadequacy. When the emotional state drives the narrative becomes distorted. Conscious mind control requires recognizing that emotional states influence thoughts, not the other way around. And when emotional states are regulated, the narrative begins to change. Here is the first framework essential for mastering conscious mind control. It is called the 3 gates of internal influence, and it reveals how every thought, reaction, and emotional response is shaped. Understanding these 3 gates transforms the way someone experiences their own mind. Gate 1 is sensory input and interpretation. Most people assume they respond to events, but they actually respond to interpretations of events. Someone frowns, the mind interprets this instantly. Someone speaks abruptly, the mind creates meaning. The interpretation happens so quickly that it feels like direct perception, but it is not. It is filtered through expectation, past experience, and emotional memory. Conscious mind control requires slowing down this interpretation process. Instead of accepting the automatic interpretation, the conscious mind can pause and ask, what am I actually observing versus what am I interpreting? This simple question creates a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap is freedom. Gate 2 is emotional filtering. Every perception passes through emotional memory before reaching awareness. This is why 2 people can observe the same event and feel completely different things. One person hears criticism and feels motivated. Another hears the same words and feels devastated. The difference is not in the event. The difference is in the emotional filter. Conscious mind control begins when someone learns to recognize the emotional filter shaping their perception. When the filter is recognized, it loses power. Gate 3 is thought translation and narrative creation. After sensory input passes through emotional filters, the mind creates a story. This story can elevate or destroy inner peace. Conscious mind control is the ability to choose the story consciously instead of accepting the automatic one. When something goes wrong, the automatic narrative might be, I always fail. This proves I am incompetent. The conscious alternative might be, this is a learning experience. I have overcome challenges before. The event is identical. The narrative is completely different. And the narrative determines the emotional response, the behavioral response, and ultimately the outcome. Understanding these 3 gates changes everything. It reveals that the mind is not an enemy, it is a system, and systems can be rewritten. Once someone learns to observe the mind, the next step is learning to interrupt patterns. Pattern interruption is one of the most powerful psychological tools ever discovered. It involves breaking the momentum of an automatic reaction before it becomes behavior. Reactivity dies when awareness enters. One of the simplest yet most powerful techniques is the 3-second pause. When a reaction begins to rise, anger, fear, defensiveness, anxiety, pausing for 3 seconds creates a window between stimulus and response. This window is where conscious control begins. During those 3 seconds, the mind has a choice: continue the automatic reaction or create a new response. The 3-second pause interrupts the neural pathway, preventing the reaction from completing its automatic cycle. Over time, this pause becomes natural. The mind begins waiting for instruction instead of reacting impulsively. Another powerful technique is narrative override. The mind creates stories based on old emotions, but these stories can be consciously rewritten. Narrative override involves consciously stating a new interpretation that weakens old patterns. Instead of the automatic story, "This is going wrong," the conscious alternative becomes, "This is an old pattern, not reality." Instead of "I cannot do this," the override becomes, "I am learning how to do this." The moment the narrative changes, the emotional response begins to shift. And when the emotional response shifts, behavior follows. But the deepest level of conscious mind control is controlling attention. Attention is the currency of the mind. Whatever receives attention grows stronger. Whatever is ignored weakens. People try to control thoughts directly, but thoughts cannot be controlled. Attention can. And when attention shifts, thoughts change automatically. One of the most misused aspects of the mind is attention given to fear-based projections. The mind creates possible negative outcomes, and attention fuels them. Conscious mind control involves redirecting attention to what can be influenced instead of what is feared. This shift reduces anxiety, stabilizes emotions, and strengthens inner power. Another layer of conscious mind control is understanding the difference between the observer and the thinker. The observer is awareness, the silent presence that notices thoughts. The thinker is the mind producing them. Most people identify with the thinker, but this is a fundamental misunderstanding. Thoughts are products of the mind, not the self. Conscious mind control begins when someone identifies with the observer instead. This shift creates a sense of psychological distance between self and thought. When the observer is active, thoughts lose power. Reactions lose intensity. Emotional storms lose control. Here is the paradox of conscious mind control. Controlling the mind does not mean forcing it. Forcing creates resistance. Control is achieved through clarity, awareness, and intentional redirection. Control is not suppression. Suppression strengthens patterns. Control dissolves them. One of the most misunderstood aspects of conscious mind control is emotional influence. Emotions shape thoughts more than thoughts shape emotions. This means emotional regulation is one of the strongest forms of conscious mind control. When the emotional system is regulated, the mind becomes quiet. Thoughts become neutral. Reactions become slower. Another layer of conscious mind control involves identity shaping. Identity is not fixed. It is a collection of reinforced patterns. When someone believes they are anxious, the identity reinforces the pattern. When someone believes they are capable of self-regulation, the identity reinforces growth. Conscious mind control involves intentionally shaping identity through repetition and alignment. Actions shape identity. Small, consistent choices create deep internal change. If someone wants to develop the identity of someone who is calm, they must act calmly repeatedly until the identity integrates. One of the most powerful moments in conscious mind control occurs when someone realizes that internal dialogue determines internal reality. The words used internally influence emotions, behavior, and perception. Conscious mind control involves speaking to the mind as if it were a student. Calmly, clearly, firmly, with guidance, not judgment. The mind responds to tone. And when internal dialogue becomes supportive, the mind begins to follow. Instead of, "I am so stupid," the conscious dialogue becomes, "I am learning." Instead of, "This will never work," it becomes, "I am discovering how to make this work." As the journey continues, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Reactions become optional. Fear becomes quieter. Clarity becomes stronger. Emotional states become manageable. And a sense of inner authority rises. Conscious mind control is not about perfection. It is about awareness, direction, and sovereignty. It is about recognizing that the mind is a tool, not a master. And tools can be mastered. There is a final truth that must be named. Consciousness is the ultimate form of control. When someone is aware, nothing can control them. Not old patterns, not external voices, not emotional storms. Awareness illuminates the mind. Awareness breaks the spell of unconscious programming. Awareness turns old reactions into choices. And choice is the highest expression of inner freedom. The journey of conscious mind control is ultimately the journey of becoming conscious. It is the process of waking up to the internal world and reclaiming the power that was always there. If this message resonates, if something in these words awakened recognition or clarity about the mind's hidden mechanics, consider subscribing to this channel to continue exploring the psychology of consciousness, self-mastery, and the extraordinary capacity of the human mind to transform itself. Like this video if it brought meaning or insight. Share it with someone who may benefit from understanding how their own mind works. And in the comments, share your own experience. What aspect of conscious mind control spoke most deeply to you? What pattern have you noticed in your own mind? The conversation continues below.